Hi and welcome to another video tutorial from gcsemathsguide.com. So today we're going to look at quadratics, and more specifically we're going to look at how to solve quadratic equation using completing the square. So to start off with, we're going to look at how to complete the square whenever we have a quadratic expression. So if you look at the first question here, we have x squared plus 2x, and this is a quadratic because I know the x has a power of 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the square, and this is how it's done. First, you open up a bracket, and then you put a square here. And I will explain to you later on why we put the square there. Then, the next thing we're going to do is put an x here. Because if I do x squared, it will give me this x squared back here. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the second term, which is 2x. And I'm going to divide the 2 by 2. I always divide it by 2. So if I do 2 divided by 2, it gives me 1. So I'm going to write down plus 1. Okay? Now after doing this step, the next thing you're going to do is put a minus here. You always put a minus after the bracket. And then you're going to square this value that we just found, the 1. Now 1 squared is equal to 1 times 1. And 1 times 1 is equal to 1. So here I'm going to write down just 1, okay? And there you go, you have completed the square. So let me just remove that, and a 1 here, okay? So now, why does this work? Well, we know for a fact if I have x plus 1 squared, it means x plus 1 times x plus 1. The bracket is repeated twice. And if I expand that, then I will end up with x times x, which is x squared, 1 times x, which is 1x, then 1 times x, which is another x, and then 1 times 1, which is equal to 1. And then we have the minus 1. And if I simplify this, I end up with x squared plus 2x, and the plus 1 and the minus 1 will cancel out. And as you can see, this gives me the original answer. Okay? Now let's move on to something a little bit more complicated, where instead of having 2 terms, we're going to have 3 terms. So I'm going to move on to the third question. Okay? So let's take a look at this one. So again, I'm going to open up a bracket, I'm going to square, and then I'm going to put a minus. You always start by doing these 3 steps when you complete the square. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write x here, and then I'm going to look at the second term, and I will divide it by 2. Now 2 divided by 2 gives me 1, so I'm going to write down plus 1. Next, I'm going to square the 1. Now 1 squared will give me 1. And then at the end, we're going to bring the plus 5, the last term of this expression, at the end of my question here. So I will write down plus 5. Now if I simplify this, I end up with x plus 1 squared, and minus 1 plus 5 gives me plus 4. And there you have it. You have completed the square with a quadratic that has 3 terms. I'm just going to go back to the previous question, where instead of having positive values, you can also have negative values. Okay, so in this case we have minus 6, and I'm going to follow exactly the same method. So again, I open up a bracket, I put a square, and I put a minus. Here I'm going to put an x. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the minus 6. So whenever you have a negative value, you have to be careful about the negative sign. So I'm going to do minus 6 divided by 2, which will give me minus 3. Okay, next I'm going to take the minus 3 and I will square it. Now minus 3 squared will give me positive 9. So I'm just going to write positive 9. And there you have it. I have completed the square. Now, what I want you to do, I want you to pause the video and see if you can try out these questions and get them right. Okay, so hopefully you have tried these questions, Let's see how we can complete the square now, but also solve an equation. So you'll notice that here I've got x squared plus 6x is equal to 0. Compared to the original question, I did not have any equal sign here. I did not have equal to 0 or equal to any number. So this is why we say that this is an expression and this is an equation, because it's equal to something. So in this case, we want to solve this equation, and to do that, we can use completing the square, which is one of the methods to solve quadratic equations. So let's go ahead and complete the square for x squared plus 6x, and we've seen how to do that before. So we open up a bracket, we put a square, and we put a minus, and here we put an x. Then we divide the 6 by 2, which will give me 3. Next, the value that I just found, which is 3, I'm going to square it. Now 3 squared is equal to 9, so I'm going to write down 9. Then I'm going to make that equal to 0, just like what we started off with. Now I'm going to solve it to find x. Whenever a question says to you solve, it means that you're trying to find the value of x. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the minus 9 and bring it to the other side of the equation, and I'm going to perform the opposite operation of minus 9. And we know that the opposite of minus 9 is plus 9. So I'm going to write down x plus 3 squared is equal to plus 9. Now I don't need to write down the plus, so I can just remove that, and I'm left with 9 only. The next thing I'm going to do is bring the square to the other side. And again, the opposite operation of squaring is taking the square root. Now here you have to be careful whenever you take a square root. Don't forget to write down plus and minus square root of 9. And the reason why it's plus and minus is because the answer to this will give me plus and minus 3. And the reason for that is because we know that in order to get this value of 9, I can use minus 3 times minus 3, which will give me plus 9. And I can use 3 times 3, which is equal to plus 9. So there's two ways of getting the 9 here. So this is the reason why we put a plus and minus. Okay? Now, after taking the square to the other side, which becomes the square root, the next thing we need to do is bring this value of 3 to the other side. So far we have plus and minus 3, and now if I bring the plus 3 to that side, it will become minus 3. And therefore we end up with x is equal to plus and minus 3 minus 3. So effectively this is going to give us two answers. We can have either x is equal to, and we choose a positive value for 3, so we're going to say plus 3 minus 3, which is equal to 0. Or if we want, we can choose a negative value of 3, so we can say x is equal to minus 3 and then minus 3, and minus 3 will give me minus 6. So there you have it. You have two answers for this equation. Now I'm going to move on to another question where instead of having two terms, I have three terms. So for this example, I will choose x squared plus 2x plus 1. So x squared plus 2x plus 1. Let's make that equal to 0. Now, again, the first thing we're going to do is complete the square. So I'm going to open up a bracket, put a square and put a minus, and here I will put an x. The next thing I will do is divide the 2 by 2, which will give me 1. We always divide by 2. Now 1 squared is equal to 1, so I'm going to write down 1, and then at the end I'm going to bring the plus 1 here. And I'm going to make that equal to 0. Actually, let's change this number to something else. Instead of a 0, let's make it, shall we say 9? So is equal to 9. Now I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to say x plus 1 squared. Now minus 1 plus 1 will leave me with 0. So here I don't have anything left, and this is equal to 9. Okay, now since I don't have any numbers here, I'm going to take the square to the other side, and if you remember what I said to you earlier, if I take a square to the other side, it becomes plus and minus square root of 9. And we know plus and minus square root of 9 will equal to plus and minus 3. Sorry. So we've removed the square and it's become square root. Now the next thing I'm going to do is bring the plus 1 to the other side. And now I will end up with plus and minus 3 minus 1, because the plus 1 becomes minus 1 here. So now I'm going to end up with two answers. The first answer will be positive 3 minus 1, which is equal to 2, or x is equal to negative 3 minus 1, which will give me x is equal to minus 4. Okay, so I hope you appreciate this video and you understand this topic now. If you have any question, don't forget to leave me a comment on the section below. Alternatively, you can also sign up to my Facebook group and my email newsletters by going into the description below and sign up so that you can receive all updates from gcsemathtutorials.com. I'll see you soon.